guilty. That was the verdict passed a week ago on Monday, the 5th of January, by a Parisian court against the 10 defendants that have been prosecuted on behalf of Brigitte Macron for the crime of cyberbullying. If you're wondering what this case is about, by the way, I would recommend that you watch an older video that I'll be putting up here in the cards, since we're speaking about a French case, so that you can get up to speed with the facts of the case and the implications, which, yes, we will be touching upon today as well, but that was one of the main focuses of the last video. So go ahead and check that out if you'd like the full picture. But in essence, Brigitte Macron had filed criminal charges. This is way different to a civil defamation suit against 10 defendants in France for cyberbullying, basically for various statements that they have made or even retweeted online surrounding not only her gender or questions around it, but also the questionable way in which her relationship with her now husband, Emmanuel Macron, first started all those years ago in the early 90s. The court pointed to particularly degrading, insulting, and malicious comments referring to false claims regarding alleged trans identity and alleged pedocriminality targeting Brigitte Macron. 8 defendants were handed suspended terms of 4 to 8 months, meaning they won't have to actually serve them, while a 9th man was sentenced to 6 months in jail over his absence from the hearing. And according to Le Monde, they and a 10th person were ordered to follow a course against hate speech online. In addition to that, 3 people who were considered to be the key instigators also had their social media accounts suspended for 6 months. All defendants were ordered to collectively pay Brigitte 10,000 euros for moral damages. The presiding judge over the case described the claims of the French First Lady's alleged pedophilia as malicious, degrading, and insulting, saying the defendants had received sentences for intentionally harming the complainant. Macron's lawyer stated that the importance of this is actually setting a precedent so that other people, particularly teenagers, don't have to face this type or this level of abuse online. I suppose we can start off with the first question. Is this trial victory definitive proof that all of these claims against Brigitte are indeed false? The answer is pretty clear according to the law, but before we get to that, let's have a look at what Candace Owens has to say, because she doesn't seem to think that this victory means anything. So in response to this victory, Candace posted the following on X. Once again, these headlines are written in a way to deceive the public into believing that Brigitte proved she was a woman. No, France just has cyberbullying laws. In another post, she doubles down and basically says that Brigitte is securing cyberbullying claims against people for discussing his, she says, dark past. Now, interestingly, she's not wrong when it comes to whether this has now proved or disproved, rather, the allegations against Brigitte. Because as per the law in France, just a reminder, the French system is foreign to me. It's a civil law system rather than a Commonwealth one, so I am doing my best. Very happy to be corrected. But as per the law, to qualify as cyberbullying, which, by the way, cyberbullying isn't even really a standalone criminal offense in France. It's instead considered an aggravating circumstance of moral harassment under the penal code. But regardless, the elements of the crime, so what needs to be proven to satisfy the crime and secure a conviction, is the following. First, repeated actions or statements, which may come from one or several individuals acting together. Second, a deterioration in the victim's living conditions resulting in harm to their physical or mental health. And thirdly, the use of a digital or online medium such as social networks, messaging apps, or forums. French case law also confirms that medical proof of harm is not a prerequisite. So the mere possibility of an impact on the victim's well-being is enough. Notice how none of the elements require that the statements had to be false. This is not a defamation claim after all. And so you can technically be guilty of cyberbullying or cyber harassment, even if you were bullying someone or harassing someone over something that is true. Now, again, I am making no assertions here, no implications. I am simply stating the law, objectively speaking. Truth or falsity are not requirements to satisfy these elements. So if someone's got a big nose and you're bullying them about their big nose, even though it's a fact, it's true that they have a big nose, they can still successfully get you prosecuted for harassing them over it. So on the face of it, Candace is not wrong. This doesn't prove that Brigitte has successfully disproved the allegations against her. Now, as a quick reminder, and I believe we did mention this in the last video on this topic, Brigitte and Emmanuel have stated that they have evidence, which they will be bringing forward in their defamation trial against Candace to formally rebut her allegations. The second question is this going to have any impact on the defamation trial in Delaware if it even goes ahead? As I've mentioned, this is a criminal trial taking place in an entirely different jurisdiction, being France. It's not a common law jurisdiction. And so the likelihood of this case impacting Candace's case seems to be quite remote. I will say that, as per my understanding, in the US, in court, you can reference foreign law. However, they are not binding. And more importantly, their admissibility depends on their probative value and whether it is relevant or fair, basically, to introduce in trial. So if the Macron's lawyers want to introduce this victory in France, I don't know if it's being appealed, it might be, but if they want to bring this up in court at a jury trial, then I suppose, based on how things normally go, they're going to have to argue why this should be introduced as evidence, because Candace's side might argue that this evidence has nothing to do with this current trial, and if anything, it's just going to sway the jury in the Macron's favor. So it would be unfair. It would be too prejudicial to Candace because it doesn't have much relevance to this case, or the prejudicial nature of it outweighs its probative value. At the same time, we do also have to remember that this was a cyberbullying case in France, not a defamation case. And that is not what Brigitte and Emmanuel are alleging against Candace. Bullying doesn't even come into it. And so from where I'm standing right now, or sitting rather, the probative value might not outweigh any prejudicial effect the evidence might have. Just my opinion. Again, happy to be corrected. Finally, let's talk about the implications more widely. We talked last video, a couple of months ago now, about how this could be seen as censorship, seeing that this is a case that is really being brought by the president's wife. I've already talked to you about how if you're a normal civilian and you rock up to a police station and tell them so-and-so is harassing you and bullying you, and I have literally done that in my capacity as a private citizen, not as a lawyer, normally they just send you off home. They tell you to go private, they tell you to not read it, whatever it is. Luckily, in my case, it did get escalated and something was done about it. But normally, that's not what ends up happening, and people tend to get dismissed. The only reason I had some recourse when I went to the police is because when they checked the file, they found a pre-existing recent stalking case against that same defendant. We had taken that person to court, we got a restraining order. And so when the stalking moved from in-person to online, the police were like, oh, whoa, there's a history here. And so they did something about it. So I will stand by what I said a couple of months ago. If this is going to be the standard, if the president's wife is able to get the government, the prosecution, to prosecute private citizens for what they say online, then let it be available as an avenue for every alleged victim of this behavior. Whether you're a prince or a pauper, all I ask for is equality in this realm. Because, as I've said, I'm not seeing that. I'm not just talking about France. I'm talking across the globe. My case was in Australia. We know people get harassed and bullied everywhere. And yet, the police and the prosecution tend to say, look, this is a personal matter. And if anything, they might step in if things really start getting serious, in the sense that maybe it's becoming a physical threat, or the person, the victim, starts to fear for their lives. But why leave it to that point? Brigitte herself has said she has done this not just to protect herself and defend her reputation and shut this down, but also to set a precedent to protect other people, particularly teenagers. If that doesn't end up happening, if nothing changes in the status quo and people are still turned back because they're just not important enough for these cases to be prosecuted, for precious time and resources to be allocated to these prosecutions, then it's just going to start looking like censorship. A remedy exclusive to the elites. So to sum it up, Brigitte initially succeeded in her defamation case against the two female defendants. That was then overturned on appeal, and that is now being appealed. And then now we have this success, which is quite more devastating for the defendants involved because it involves getting a criminal record. Unlike a defamation case where, of course, you wouldn't secure a criminal record simply for being found liable, not guilty, liable for defamation, which is what would happen to Candace if she loses. I will be keeping an eye out on this case and any case in relation to Brigitte Macron and these allegations that are being made against her, which of course includes any updates in relation to their defamation case against Candace in Delaware. That's it for today. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.